Welcome to the One Big Thing podcast, where inspiration meets transformation. Well, hey, Merry Christmas. Welcome to the One Big Thing podcast. I'm your host, Steve Campbell. You guys are in for a treat today. If you are listening on Christmas Day, God bless you for taking these 35 minutes to listen to this today. If you're making cookies around the house or you just unwrap gifts, but I also know that this is evergreen content. So you might be hearing this episode sometime into the new year or some point in your journey where you just discovered the one big thing. Wherever you're coming from today, I appreciate you being my guest. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode today. Usually I have super famous people on that I get to tell their story and find out what their one big thing is. But you're going to hear from a brother of mine who's near and dear to my heart that always doesn't get to be on screen, and Hector Lopez. We're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about life as dads, but we're also going to talk about something that I don't think we always bring to the surface, in that we all have so much time on this earth. And there are people that God has placed into our life that we need to learn how to make the most of those relationships, no matter if it's been hard, no matter if there's unforgiveness. We're going to get into some of that today because life is always worth it. So I hope you enjoy this episode of The One Big Thing. I think on this holiday season, to wish all of you a Merry Christmas. This is a special one, and I hope you'll come back for more episodes from here on out. Well, welcome back to the One Big Thing podcast. This is a very special episode today. Merry Christmas to all of you. When we set our calendar and we go out and record, we never know when episodes are going to fall. And we thought, you know what, should I delay not sending an episode out on Christmas? Or you know what, let's do it a little bit different. So if you're joining me today, this episode is going to be fun for me because I actually have joining me in the studio, Hector Lopez. If you're new to the One Big Thing, this is an interview style show where typically I interview people from all walks of life. These have been NFL alumni. I've had musicians on, I've had politicians, and they all share their one big thing that can hopefully inspire and encourage you to move the ball forward in your life. And with this being the Christmas, being a holiday, I want to give a little bit of background as to why Hector's on this episode today. Hector is a part of the media team that helps me produce a lot of these episodes, as well as Ditch the Suits podcast, which I'm a co-host of. He's usually behind the scenes, editing the videos, helping bring the audio to life. But he's also been a dear friend and brother of mine for several years. We have done life together. We work together as colleagues. But before this, we've also been on the mission field in Africa together, helping love on people across, this world. I was also a part of his wedding day with him. And so we've been kindred spirits. We've been spiritual brothers. And when we said, what can we do for this Christmas episode? We thought, let's do it together. And this one's unique because if you're watching on YouTube at NQR Media, I'm actually in the same room with a guest for the first time, other than my wife, Stephanie, which was episode number 1, which you got to go check out. This is my first in studio episode with somebody. So, Hector, welcome to the One Big Thing. And why don't you tell people kind of your vision behind this unique episode today?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks, Steve. This has been a long time coming. I've been on the other side of the camera for a while, and just watching Steve start and just flourish through this podcast. It's been so awesome to see all the guests that he's had on and edit the videos and really just kind of push him further too. So this episode is going to be really fun. First off, this is a little bit of a behind the scenes episode, if you will. We're going to talk about some of the things that the podcast is basically centered around, some of the ideas that we've had from the beginning, some of the ideas that we had when Steve made his little transformation and tried to edit and kind of push it forward even better. We're going to talk about some other stuff as to like why Steve's even having these conversations. What are some hard conversations that we need to have and things that he's having? It's conversations that him and I are having about the podcast, but also just about life as well. He might not have said it, I don't remember, but I'm a new dad, I'm a husband, so we have a lot in common in that front. And yeah, this is going to be awesome. I'm really excited.
Well, it's good because for us setting up this in studio today, it took us an hour and a half. We got our buddy Messiah in the studio with us today, trying to set up these cameras, trying to set up these angles. So we knew the Lord's working today. But Hector, I wanted to start off with you because we were talking a lot about the journey that we've had through the one big thing.
Yeah.
When you launch a podcast, there are blueprints as to like how to make a successful podcast, but to really make it your own as a content creator, you've been involved since the beginning with me. Hector actually designed the cover art for the one big thing. So he's really tried to bring the brand and my role as a dad, as a husband to life to reach people. And it's been about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
We've had over 40 episodes. Recently we kind of reimagined the one big thing, and
Yeah.
Messiah was a part of that with us, where, for the first 34, 35 episodes, it was an hour long. I mean, these were some deep, rooted emotional conversations about life, about depression, about overcoming, about fitness, about health. And I thought about you as a user, as a listener of this show, like how can I make the most of your time if you're in the car driving around or you're in your kitchen doing dishes? And we decided together, what if we took it to a 30-minute show?
Mhm.
What if we reversed the entire concept and just at the beginning talked about what is each person's one big thing and then broke it down? And so Hector has been a part of this journey with me, as well as my wife, Stephanie. When I record an episode and I get done, they're usually my first texts that come through, like, hey, how did it go? How was the experience? And I get to share with them. And so obviously, Hector gets to edit all of these episodes and listen. And he's the one who's like, man, I loved when you said this in that particular part of the episode. And that's how we create these reels and these shorts to get people interested. But, I think today we wanted to talk about, what the experience has been like, talking about, I think, how difficult actually having a podcast is. It took us an hour and a half to set up today. And so just part of that journey. So I wanted to turn it over to you because I know you
Yeah.
had some initial questions to kind of get us started for today.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also as well, I just want to guide this conversation with just some questions that, as I put myself in a listener's perspective, like you guys listening today, what are some things you might ask Steve on his journey through the podcast? So that's kind of where I'm headed. That's kind of where my mindset's at. I'm not sitting here giving you a one big thing, but I'm trying to kind of pull a little bit out of that from Steve. So, with doing this, Steve, over the course of this year and a half, almost 2 years, what is the one thing that has shocked you the most about your guests specifically?
Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of helps leading into that question that because you've been a dear friend of mine for a long time, is that for almost, a decade, I've had on Facebook and social media, I've always been an encourager. And so it's been really cool with me that sometimes you send things out on social media and you don't know who it's going to encourage. But then I have, a random guy I went to high school with or somebody from my
Yeah.
past that reaches out to me and is like, dude, how did you know I needed to hear that?
Yeah.
And so the vision for the one big thing was like, how could I always stay reachable to listeners?
Mhm.
I didn't, part of my job is going out and finding these influential people. And even I get a kick out of when they actually respond to me like, holy crap, they actually got back to me. What if I could create that feeling for anybody tuning into the show, where when you reach out to me, you're going to get a real time response? And when you have things that are important or that you value, or you want somebody to talk about that, I'm here to listen. And so every sign off of the show has been, hey, guys, if there's things that are near and dear to your heart that you want to hear about or particular people you want to hear from, message me and let me know. And so as you and I were talking about this conversation, it's like to all of you that tune in, I appreciate you more than you know. But I also want you to know I'm just one text message or one email away from getting in contact with me. And so with that, I've been blessed to be in front of people I would have never, ever, I mean, obviously it's virtual, but that you would have never convinced me a decade ago I'd ever have the opportunity to actually connect with on screen and have an interview with. And what's wild for me is I gotta let my emotions go. You reach out to a famous person, an athlete, a musician, and they come back and say, "Steve, I'd love to be on your show." That's like step one. That's like, okay, we're in. And then it's part of like scheduling them and getting on their calendar because they live busy lives and you do that. And then even once you've confirmed the date and time of a recording, it's this anticipation of me signing into the studio. And Hector always does the sound check with my guests, so him and I are together and you just kind of wait because the way that our recording studio works is it lets you know when somebody enters the studio to record. And sometimes you get these very influential people and you hope that it works out. And then you and I are sitting in the recording studio and it says Glenn Jacobs, who was Kane in the WWE, or Stephen Day, who's a huge Nashville recording artist, is in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And you just like have to take a deep breath and you're like, be cool, be cool, be cool, be cool. And you let them into the room and it's just like, hey, Steven, so good to see you. And it's just like off you go.
Yeah.
And so to your point about like what have I learned? Even though I come in anxious or like don't screw this up or like honor their time, there's something that happens like halfway through every episode that's kind of magical. And that as I listen to them, I realize like these people are human beings just like me. And even though I might hold them out, into a high pedestal or really appreciate their music or their athletic career or, the movies they were in, there comes a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, man, these people are just like me.
Yeah.
Like they have their own insecurities. They have things they deal with. They have negative mindsets that it's like you would assume having money, having all the followers, producing the hit songs. It's like not that they don't have a care in the world, but I don't think you and I maybe always understand that these people, these politicians, are human beings just like you and I. And so you start off being a fan, and through the conversation, you become a friend,
Yeah.
where it's like, that's crazy to me that I didn't know that you, famous person, struggled with that. I feel more connected to you. And so then it's my job to like, how do I get that same experience to jump off the page of the video or into your headphones where you have a moment as a listener where you're like, okay, I'm not alone.
Mhm.
The things that I thought were holding me back, that I'm depressed about, or that like, do I really belong? Am I good enough at this?
Yeah.
Like, am I a good dad? Am I a good mom? Am I doing what I should be doing? When you have a super famous person who's like, when I get done doing a rock concert, I go back to my tour bus and I'm like, am I even any good at this?
Yeah.
My hope is that all of a sudden you feel not alone anymore. And so that's been part of the coolest journey for me. And just trying to honor that with these guests, like, how do I also get them to talk about things that they don't always get to talk about, right? Because it's super easy to have somebody on for the thing they're known for and be like, talk to me about music or talk to me about the WWE. But it's when they're like, yeah, when I have that mask on or when I record that song, like, I don't always know if it's good. It's like, great, I want to talk about that because that's the mindset that I think all of us in our late 20s, 30s, and 40s may be struggling with, no matter how successful you are, which is just, am I any good at this? And like, does anybody care about what I'm making?
Yeah, that's a really cool perspective that you have. I noticed with a couple of the episodes that you've put together that after the episode was completed, some of your guests had messaged you or in conversation post recording. They mentioned like, "Oh man, I didn't. That was really cool. I didn't think we were going to go that way." I think I can list a couple of them, but I just think that's one of the coolest things about you is you kind of pull out of people what you just said, something that they didn't even know they had in them, and they really appreciate that. They really appreciate a voice that is a little bit different than what they're known for. But with that, how have you been able to critique yourself and take criticism on this podcasting thing, right? This is new to you. You're a really great speaker. You've always been a good speaker, but being vulnerable enough to record episodes, have people listen, say, this is what you did well, this is what you did not do well. How have you been able to take that? Because you have made changes and you have humbled yourself enough to do that. But what is that like?
Well, I think if you make anything, whether it's music, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a widget, I think it's being really honest in when you record something in my world, like, would I even want to listen to this?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's really great that these people are on this show and they're famous, and it's like maybe that's what drew you in. And maybe you come in as a fan, but soon you start to realize, like, wow, there's a side to this person I never knew. I have anxiety, and this person has anxiety. Like, that's cool to know. That might make you a greater fan because now when you hear certain songs and lyrics, you're like, "Oh, that's what they're singing
Yeah.
about. Like, where do I belong in this world?" Or the star quarterback who was drafted in the first round who was like, "I hated seeing my face on the billboard in Minnesota." You're like, "But isn't that like what we all want when you don't have it?" Like, I would die for people to know me,
Mhm.
you know? And then this idea of being known with these guests, it's like not that they don't wanna be known, but sometimes it's too much that they miss the privacy of their life.
Yeah.
And so I think when you're in a season of like, does anybody see me? Does anybody care? You strive for the thing you've never had. And what's neat with these guests is like they have what many of us desire to have and they don't want it. And then you're just like, why is the human experience like that?
Yeah.
So when I listen to shows, it's not just I want you to come on and hear from the NFL player about their stats and their career or the musician about their hit songs. I want to talk about like the behind the scenes, like, did you know that was going to be a hit?
Yeah.
Like, did you know that character you were portraying was going to take off? And when they're like, no, like I actually had to like convince myself, like, do it anyway. And so like that's what I say to myself as a dad and as a husband, like, do it anyway. It's hard. You know, and I think for all of us, we really are trying to figure out, am I doing what I should be doing in life? And like, how do you know? So to have a show, and like, I just had this conversation with my wife the other day. The one big thing is not a murder mystery podcast. It's not a, is Bigfoot real? It's not shock and awe. It's humans. And there may be a much smaller niche of people that follow the one big thing, but if it's only 10 people and those 10 people get one thing that inspires them or gets them out of depression, then I'm doing what I set out to do. But in that comes a strong evaluation of like, did I even like that episode? How could I have been better? How could I have asked that question different? And so, one of the hard parts for me, and this is the honest part of me, I don't like getting feedback all the time. Especially when you're a content creator. You don't want your wife or your good buddy to be like, "Hey, like I feel like you could have look at the camera more or like get away from your mic or like why was that question? Why did it take you 2 minutes to ask a question?" That you're just like, "Dude, like you're not doing it." And there's a part of your pride that wants to let that sit in, but then I have to step back and be like, "You know what? There are people in my life that really do want me to become the best version of myself.
Yeah.
How do I take what they're saying and remove like they're not attacking me, but they're thinking about you as the listener, right?" And so I think there's part of you're always going to need people that have your back, like truly have your back, that want to make sure you're being the best dad, the best husband, the best wife. But then there's going to be fans that just, dude, it's been 2 years of recording content. I've had people on YouTube that have been like, "Why does his face always get red? Why does his hair look like that? This guy's an idiot." And you like read that stuff and you're like, I'm trying to help people. My face gets red because like I care and I'm passionate. I've always had that since I was a kid. But like if you're not strong enough, there will always be critical people in your season and on your journey. And I think it's just learning to always remember that one person that even if I release an episode and it didn't take off the way I wanted it to, it's when the guy I haven't spoken to in 20 years is like, "I've been really stuck in depression for a long time, and your episode really helped me." Or like as you and I were talking about the episode with Netter Gorman, Life
Yeah.
After Sugar. I was addicted to sugar, and I listened to your episode. Now I've been a year and a half clean of sugar.
Mhm.
It's like that's what it's all about. So am I making the kind of content that is digestible that someone could listen to a half hour at a time and take one thing, one small idea that could help them?
Yeah. The one small idea from the one big thing.
I know, isn't that crazy?
I love that. You've mentioned your kids many times on these episodes, and I have to. We didn't really talk about this too much, but I have to ask you, like, what do they think? How is Steve at home? How is he? Like, what's that like? What do your kids think of you as a podcast? Do they see you as a
Oh
podcaster? Have
yeah.
they listened to your episodes? Is it like the coolest thing ever? Like, tell the listeners a little bit about like your
The
relationship with the
behind the
kids in
scenes?
this podcast. Yeah, tell
I
them a
think
little
my
bit
my
about that.
kids think I'm really famous.
Yeah,
And it's funny to me because like my girls, so if you guys don't know, I got four kids. My oldest son is 8 turning 9. My second son is 7, and I have twin identical girls that are 4. And I'll catch them carrying around a comb in their hand, like a mic, and they'll be like, "Welcome to the one big thing."
that's awesome.
And like it's fun for me, or they'll put my face on this big screen TV through Spotify. And it's not just them, it's my neighborhood kids. I get text messages from my neighbors like, "We're all around the TV watching this tonight."
That's
And
awesome.
so, like, it's very easy for me to be like, "Lord, I want to reach more people. Like, I want this to take off." And sometimes I have to stop myself and be like, if all it is for that family across the street, that like Rick Yarish's veteran episode touched their soul, you did it. And if my kids are like, "Welcome to the one big thing," and to me it's funny, and like sometimes I'll put them to bed at night and I'll be like, "Well, on another edition of the one big thing episode," and I'll interview my kids and I'm like, "What's your one big thing?" And my kids are kids, they'll say anything ridiculous, but to me it's inspiring to them. And one of the coolest moments is my buddy Jeff Kavanaugh that came on. He's a huge reporter for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
He and I recorded an episode on mental health and anxiety and ADHD in his life. And same thing, one of those episodes where when we got done, he was like, "I don't get to talk about this. Thank you." And I was like, "Yeah, man, like you're going to help a lot of people." The next day, I'm in my car and Jeff was going live on Instagram and he's got a huge following down in Dallas. And I signed on. And so when you're on Instagram, it shows like Steve Campbell's entered the chat. And I just put, "Love you, buddy." And he stopped his video and goes, "You know what? Steve Campbell just wrote, and I was just on his podcast. That dude's changed some people's lives." And my kids heard it in the car and they were like, "Dad, is that you?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's dad."
That's awesome, man.
And it's like one small thing. It's not going across the airwaves of America. But for me, it's those little like moments that make me between my kids, these neighbors, and whatever be like, we're doing it.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is,
yeah.
but something's happening.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, just to even know that your kids see you as even more of a hero than what you already are. They're seeing you chase your dreams and not really even know like what it entails or what the repercussions are or like if you had 7 million followers, they don't know, they don't care. It's just they want to see dad do what he loves to do, and I think that's one of the most, awesome things about you is, and I'm glad you could share that with your listeners to them to see like, man, like this dude cares, his kid cares, he's all about it, he's giving back to his family. And I think that's freaking amazing. That's that you've won, like you said, like that's you've already won there. Um,
Well, and I think it's really important too, and part of the evaluation that you were asking me about. It's very easy in a season of life when you're dad with kids and kids are so a part of your life. Every conversation with guests about kids. And I try to be very thoughtful that there are listeners that don't have children.
for sure.
There are listeners that are in a different season of life than I am. And I just want to make sure that I'm not defaulting to what I know and what I'm experiencing, that every time I speak, it's kind of the same thing that I say about like being a parent is hard. So it's like, oh, I'm hearing from Glenn Jacobs or this famous person, but then when Steve speaks, he just talks about how hard being a parent is. So part of my awareness is also just like, yes, that is a part of my life right now. I am a parent, things are hard. How do I keep the conversation on where the conversation needs to be so that if somebody's experiencing the one big thing for the first time, it's not defaulting to the hard thing in my life. And I think we're all guilty of that. When you get together with another friend, it's like, dude, how's life? You default to the thing that's really hard for
It's on
you.
your mind.
So just trying to like honor the listener with these shows and be like, talk about other stuff because they may be single or without kids or going through something. So like that's a big part of it.
Yeah, odd that you say that. Very odd, because my next question is going to be basically saying, well, what's on your heart right now, right? You don't get to do what you just said. Sometimes you can infuse the hard things that you're going through into some of these episodes, and it could sound like Steve's going through the same thing, or you're having these hard conversations often, and people have kind of heard that already. But um, I want to give you the space right now to kind of talk about what's something that is hard right now for you, just to talk about because you're at the mercy of what your guests want you to talk about, right? You're at the mercy of Glenn Jacobs or Netta Gorman talking about sugar. You can't really bring anything up. So right now, what's on your heart that you and I've been kind of talking about recently?
Well, and it's funny too, you guys may not realize this. Like when you schedule a guest to be on, like I always send them an outline
For
that's
sure.
like, hey, we got 30 minutes, let's crush it. Here's generally how the show goes. In a number of times I've gotten live with a guest and I'm like, so before we record, before you guys hear anything, it's like get a chance to review the thing, and they're like, no. And I'm like, crap, this person's really famous. I don't want to say like, let's reschedule. So you're like, do you even know what the show's about? And they're like, no. So I even have to, as the host, make it about the one big thing, even though they're not prepared.
Hmm.
And so it's like active listening as they're talking. And there was one episode that like you and I laughed with Phil Fulmer that I do not know what he said the entire episode because my internet kept buffering at my house. But the way our podcast recording works is it will always stream 4K afterwards. And so when I literally say, like, I had this famous Hall of Fame college football coach that coached Peyton Manning on, he's a hometown legend in Knoxville, Tennessee, on the show. It took us 3 times to finally get on our calendars together. I say, welcome to the one big thing, Phil Fulmer. Phil, tell us about yourself. For 40 minutes, his internet buffered, and I have no idea what he said except for every 15th word. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, Lord, you're going to have to help me. And when we got done, you sent me the episode. And I was like, oh, it's actually pretty good because I heard the words I needed to hear, which was crazy to me. But like these are experiences that nobody hears. And as a host, like I don't want to get in the way. But of the things that you and I have been thinking about, and I don't know if this is going to resonate with any of you guys. This episode is obviously coming out on Christmas. I got my Christmas swag on today. It's the holidays. I think this time of year always, I think for me, I'm a very reflective person. So I always think about the bigger picture. And you and I were talking about that. Like one of the things that's really been on my heart is how do I honor people better? And I don't know that everybody thinks about that, but that's transformed into like, all right, how do I honor the guests? How do I honor the listeners? How do I honor my colleagues or family members, even when it's not deserved? Or like, I understand that life is so short. And that's made me actually think a lot about, and I don't mean this in a morbid way whatsoever. And you and I had kind of touched on it. I've thought about death a lot. And not death in like I'm anxious driving over bridges and like, what if my life ends today? But just at this stage in my life, having kids, being married, thinking about my parents that are still with me, like there's going to come a time where they're not going to be here. There's going to come a time where I'm not going to be here. And I've just found myself like thinking about like, man, am I am I really the man that I want to be for my kids and my wife? Like I'm doing stuff like this. This is amazing. But when that's not on, am I present with my kids? Like, yeah, they know I do a podcast, but would they be like, my dad taught me life, you know? And I just the day we're recording this, this will come out on Christmas, staying at my in-laws or my parents for the holidays. And I heard a guy talk about on another podcast that I live out of state now, so I come up once a year. And he said that if your parents are still alive, you can't ever project how long they're going to live, but let's say it's 15 years. If you go back home or back to wherever one time per year, you, if you're lucky, have 15 more times with your parents. And I don't know what it was about putting it in that context because it's real. I FaceTime my parents, I see them virtually, but I probably see them in person 1 to 2 times, if that, per year. It really hit me like, man, I'm probably gonna have 15 more times with my dad. And I don't know. This morning I was sitting with him and I told him that. And I think it's so easy to look at the limitations of people or the things they don't do or the disappointments and set up boundaries and keep people at arm's way, especially family members. And I think through doing all these interviews with all these people, one resounding like message is I just wish I appreciated it more. I wish I appreciated my career more. I wish I appreciated the people more. And so it's like, man, when you hear that stuff, it's like, what am I doing with that? And so the one thing that's been like really on my heart recently is like, how am I appreciating Hector in my life and not just taking you for granted that I see you every day? And how does that get me to slow down? But I think more so as you and I were talking about like our parents, like how do we enjoy them? How do we like love on them? And how do we, even with any things that have gone wrong or didn't go the way we thought they were going to go or disappointments, because you're going to be disappointed with your parents, you know, and then you're trying to forge your own life with your kids. But just like how do I understand that death comes for all of us and that life is so short? We're going to blink and we're all going to be older. How do you, not just in this holiday Christmas spirit, but throughout time, like how do you really appreciate people? And that all culminated because I've been thinking a lot recently about my grandmother that passed 3 years ago. And I don't know what it is about this time of year, but I just told my wife, Stephanie, I'm like, man, I really miss grandma. And I just wish I had more time with her. So, like, then how do I make the most of the time with the people that I do have? Because life is so fleeting.
Yeah, you almost want to say, Lord, thank you for giving me this mindset right now,
Yeah.
allowing me to realize the 15 times that I have left with my dad in your example, and say, you know what, I'm going to be the most intentional I can be with every single person I have so that when they do pass, you could say, I did it well. I did a good job.
Yeah.
I did a good job of making the most of my time. And that's one of the things that I have in my heart as well is when someone passes away, I don't want to have any regrets for things I didn't say, for conversations that we didn't have and moments that we didn't have together. I want to be able to be like, I want it to be all good. I want it to be all amazing memories. And I want in the back of my mind to be able to say, I tried my best with that relationship. And we're having these conversations. So I hope the listener, if you have anybody that's close, anybody that's older, anybody that you don't see often, please call them up, go visit them, take the time to really invest into them because that is very important.
Well,
Um,
and I would even just say that had to somebody listening, and it's in my own life. If there are people that, there needs to be some forgiveness.
oh yeah.
Yeah, don't let things go to the grave without saying what, like, if we really are honest with each other, the things that probably like frustrate us about another person, a miscommunication, a
Mhm.
missed expectation, something wasn't done the way we thought we were going to be done. Like, is it really worth carrying a 25-year grudge that's not spoken, but it's your heart condition that when you engage with that person, you're like, but they hurt me? That might be true. But let's acknowledge it and let's understand that we only got so much time. And like, how hard is it to really seek restoration and to really be honest, be like, Dad, like this hurt me when you said this a few years ago, but I don't want to carry that anymore. I'm sorry too. And understanding that you play a role in these things. Like, I'm sorry that I have not been fully present. I'm sorry that I don't bring my kids around as much. I'm sorry that, like, I don't spend time with you the way that I should. And in whatever time we have left, like, I just want us to have the best years of our life. so that when you're no longer here, or if when you're a spouse, I've talked with this a lot about Steph lately. Like, I don't know, like any parent can resonate with this. Hector, I know you got a new baby. When you have a kid or kids, like movies hit harder that you've like watched in a way. And if this like resonates with you, please drop a comment in the chat box. Like Home Alone, I cry at the end of Home Alone when the music plays. Cried. I bawled my eyes out during Coco. Like movies when you have kids, I don't know that life just takes on a different perspective.
Why Home Alone?
When the music starts playing and the old man sees his like kids, you know, if you remember in Home Alone, Christmas time, go watch it today. The old man is the creepy guy across the
Yeah.
street with a
Yeah, yeah,
shovel. And at
yeah.
the end of the movie, you realize like he's a really good man. And at the end of
Gotcha.
the movie, his kids come back home because Kevin tells him, "Kill him," and he calls him and says sorry. And it's like parts of movies now, scores of songs in movies. Dude, if you turn around on the couch with my family, I'm bawling. And it's just because like I think it's just this like appreciation for life, you know? And it's just like things impact me in a different way now. And so I've been talking a lot about Steph, like, babe, I don't want to fight with you anymore. Like, yeah, we're gonna have disagreements, we're gonna have miscommunications, but like when that happens, like let's acknowledge, let's not let this carry on for a day, 2 days, 3 days. And my trump card is not because I'm gonna die. But I do like that is the context that I'm thinking about is like I get hit by a car today. And I don't want our last conversation leaving the house of like, we're just disappointed in each other. So if we look at other couples or other families and we're like, man, people just need to bury the hatchet and restore. Like, if we're in the middle of something, how do we implement? And that's kind of what you and I were talking about. Like, how do we implement the things that frustrate us in other people, like in a meaningful way that, like, if we aren't leading the charge, how can we ever expect our parents or our siblings to do the things that we wish they would do if we're not even doing that ourselves?
How do you set the tone to do the hard things that people don't want to do?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, this is phenomenal about this. This is like really deep. You make me a little emotional here, but I also want to get into the future of OBT.
Sure.
What are some hopes and some dreams that you have for the One Big Thing podcast coming up in 2025 and also beyond, really? I know you've had an awesome time with the group that we did.
Hmm.
And I know you want to do a bunch more of those master classes.
Yep.
Sorry, I couldn't think of the word at the time. Yeah, we had an amazing time with the master class, with the men's master class. What else is in store for One Big Thing in the future?
I think it's just like, how do I make more meaningful like impact and conversations with listeners of the show? You know, you and I, when we record an episode, it's like, okay, what kind of reels or shorts do we want to make? What kind of highlights? When's the best time to post that? And part of the frustration is when you release content, you're releasing it into a sea of everything. So when you post a reel on Instagram, it's also competing with Theo Vaughn videos, which I love that dude. He's hysterical. Or
Yeah, good one.
the funny kid videos. It's like so your piece of content is competing with like somebody else's news feed. And I think what we've been trying to discover is like, okay, if we discover that there are people that acknowledge, like, I really enjoy your podcast. And if you know you're there for one guest, like you're a part of it now. Or if you're there and every other Wednesday you want to listen, like you're a part of it now. How can I create channels of communication where I'm speaking directly to fans of the show and they can speak to me? And so what we've been trying to develop is what was called these master classes, which again, I feel very blessed to be able to have access to people I would have never thought I would have access to. And once you start having as many guests as I've had, 45 plus people now, you notice common backgrounds, common themes, common topics. And so part of the idea of the master class was, you know, what if we could get one, two, three of these prior guests to come back? And again, now we're doing half-hour shows. There is definitely, when we get done with these conversations, still meat on the bone, still things we could have talked about. And even when I get done with the guests on the show and I have time on screen, we're not recording anymore. It's just me and them. It's like anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to get into. And they're like, yeah, I would have loved to talk about my battle of infertility. And it's like, dude, why didn't we talk about that?
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, you know, you start taking like inventory of all the things people like to talk about and wish they talked about. So the master class was this concept of what if we could have like a virtual workshop, have these guests come back, I'd moderate it because I know them, and we would just have conversations about life and that were important. And the very first one that we did was in October in 2024. We did one for men and dads that I had three prior guests on. You were a part of it in the crowd. We had 30 plus men from all over the country, and you never know what when you do something new, like the impact it's going to have. Halfway through that thing, the comments that were in the chat box, we were talking about like fatherhood and identity and being a man. these guys who were in California and in Oregon and all over the country were like chat typing, "What if I've lost my purpose?"
Mhm.
And you read that and you're like, "Holy cow." Like we're getting into something that like you're not going to go to your colleague and say, "Hey, Hector, what if I lost my purpose?" But these guys felt welcomed enough and open enough to expose like I don't feel like I have a purpose anymore. And I was like, I want to honor that. And so it's been very cool that whether it's your health journey, your personal journey, your financial journey, I want to bring the guests that I've had access to in a way that would allow you as a listener to have access to in a chat room where it's like, I don't know if everybody's going to be able to have a one-on-one with Merrill Hodge. But I did. So what if I could bring Merrill Hodge to you? And all of a sudden you could like talk and communicate to Stephen Day or Kane or any of these amazing women I've had on the show. And now all of a sudden, like you're not DMing them on Instagram hoping they respond. They're on screen with you.
Yeah.
And you can raise your hand and be like, hey, Meg Jacoby, she's coming out here in 2025. She's the High Rocks world champion. How did you get into fitness? And like, what's been your struggle? What have you learned? And she responds to you, not to me. Cool is that?
That's cool.
So it's like basically like how can we take the one big thing to the people and give them access to guests that I've had opportunity to. And so we want to create more meaningful channels to communicate directly to them, but then create events where they can come be a part of other people that may be struggling or trying to get better in whatever area we might be bringing to them.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I can't wait. I can't wait for that fitness one. I know you got some guests that you want to bring on for to bring some fitness insight to people, and I think what's going to happen is you're going to start to see a community of people that can trust you. People that can trust you not because of the things you're saying, but because of what you're actually doing. When you say that you want people to find you and find the people that you're bringing on the show, and you want them to learn from them and have help from these people, from their stories, you're actually doing that. You're actually bringing the people that they don't have access to their front door. They can trust you. They can follow your journey. And yes, we do have a bunch of channels that we're exploring, that we're excited to get you, the listener, to be more engaged, to have direct contact with Steve, to be able to talk to him about whatever you want, and we're super excited for that as well.
Yeah, I think when you're out and about doing life with other people, like when you really do get deep with people, you realize that there are a handful of things in their life that are holding them back. Could be money, relationships, children, marriage. And it's like, man, what if we could? I know what I'm not. I'm not a sensational podcast. I'm not a place you're going to come to be fully entertained,
Mhm.
but I'm going to create a space in a community where you feel like trust and intimacy can be built
Yeah.
and that you're going to have access to people you wouldn't normally have access to and also maybe have the opportunity to engage with them. And so to me, that's like such a cool thing, which is I get excited when a guest says yes because I get excited for you. I get excited that like, yeah, I'm graced enough to have 30 minutes with a musician I look up to or I listen to all the time, or an NFL player that like, holy crap, they're on the screen with me. But then it's like, for what purpose? As we get going, it's like, why are they here? What am I supposed to pull out from them that can help you as a listener? And that's like, that's the biggest thing, dude, you and I have talked about is there's so many resources out there today for how to be in the best shape of your life, how to be the best parent. And there's still just people that don't know how to do it. And so every episode isn't going to give you the silver bullet to like, this is how to do it, but it's one idea stacked on top of each other. If the idea is good, hold on to it, chew it, put it on the table. If it's garbage, throw it out. If you're not sure, put it on the shelf, save it for later. But you're going to know from every episode moving forward when you start to listen. Today, I got Hector Lopez on the one big thing, and we're going to talk about life as a new dad. If that's not for you, go listen to that one. Come back and be a part of a community. And so, yeah, man, I think my thing is how do I take what's always been my passion, which is to encourage and inspire people, and do it in a meaningful way through candid conversations with influential people that are making a real difference, but acknowledging that there's still some things that they're struggling and working through to bring you and them together to realize we're all human beings trying to figure this thing out. And it's just let's give them one or two small things in every episode. Making your bed, meal prepping, talking to your kids in a more meaningful way. I think that's the stuff that in between the Theo Vaughn and in between the funny things, like check back out the one big thing.
Yep.
Like get the one thing that can help you to be those best versions of yourself in the areas of life you live.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think one thing the listeners might not know about you is that this podcast is for you just as much as it is for the
Oh yeah.
listener. And I love that about you. I love that you've built this podcast because you know you needed it. You know that you needed the conversations that you have with all these people on your shows. just as much as they need it. And you're basically them just in front of the screen. And that's really it. And that's the coolest part because you're calling me up and telling me, dude, this was an amazing episode. I'm deeply impacted this way. I'm so glad this person said this thing. Like it's not something that is just I'm gonna try to curate something for someone else and not have any partake in it. It's like no, like what that person said. I mean, the depression episode was one that touched you a lot, and you were able to just like have an amazing conversation. It's just it's really cool to see that you are getting touched by the stuff that you want other people to also be impacted by.
Yeah, and I think it's just, for those that are maybe new to this one, I started the one big thing because I needed encouragement probably more than anybody. And so it's been fun for me that I get this 30 minutes of time with these people that touch my heart. And then it's just like, okay, how do we make the content in a way that's digestible for
Mhm.
people? But it's also neat that it's forming friendships for me that, you never would have convinced me 15 years ago that when I was watching, Monday Night Raw as a kid and Kane came out, if you would have told me and whispered in my ear, like, hey, 15 years from now, you're going to get to know that guy.
That's
I
cool.
would have been like, no way. And I wonder for how many of us we wish we could see the whole picture. The picture would crush us because we'd cut corners, because we would try to make it and manifest it. And part of this journey for me has been like, don't force something that's not there. Don't try so hard with these people that you're trying to be impressive or you're trying to show off. Like, this show is about them and you're just the one that gets to guide it. And so part of stepping back was in an hour-long episode, I probably spoke for half of it. This one's a little bit different. I'm speaking more than normal.
Yeah.
But I wanted these shows to be about the guest,
Yeah.
in honoring the guest and just basically being a guide. So, I think it's just how to keep getting better. But my big thing in 2025 is I want to hear from you guys. I want to keep bringing guests that I think mean something to you so that you feel like when you suggest a guest and I bring them on, it's because of you. And I just don't know with some of the popular podcasts out there today how much access you have to some of these people. So that's what I think I'm really excited about.
That's cool. Well, I know that we're wrapping up here in a few minutes, but if I had to this might lead into a whole nother episode, but if I have to ask you this one question, maybe you can answer it super quickly.
Sure.
Up to this point on this day today, because I know this answer will change, what has been your favorite episode?
Oh boy. It's like when you're a parent, all
I
your
know.
kids are your favorite.
I know I had to do it.
I think they each take on an evolution that once you have a big person on that you really like admire, you're like, that was the coolest until the
Yeah.
next one.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you gonna give us a PR answer, or are you gonna give us a real answer?
I don't know that I have one. I would say the one of the most impactful ones was the Carl Banger depression one,
Yeah.
because that was the most like deep-seated, meaningful, emotional one. But then just like the pinch me ones, Kane.
So the PR answer is coming out.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Bradley Rose of Peloton was a lot of fun because this is
Yeah,
a
that
guy
was
I
the
had
UK.
rode to and he was from the UK. And
Yeah.
it's just, Dave Barnes here a couple weeks ago, that I had the opportunity to record with.
Rick
So
Yarish was amazing. How
Rick
could you
Yorish.
not?
Yeah. And like, dude, I hope we got time and we can get this in there. When you make content, you make a 30-minute clip, 30-minute show, and who would have known that one clip from Rick's episode would get 26 million views?
Not me.
And so just don't, I would encourage all of you guys, no matter what you do for a living, do it with all your heart because you never know where the viral moment's going to come from. Don't force it. You don't know what's going to be the thing that brings people together. So just don't shortcut the journey because there's going to be magic in the entire process if you do it with all your heart. And I think that's one thing you try to push each other about is like when we show up, how do we be the best versions of ourselves and give ourselves and let the outcomes kind of speak for itself.
That's awesome. No, that's amazing. Want to close this out?
Hey, thanks for tuning into the One Big Thing podcast. Merry Christmas to all of you guys. Appreciate you being here with me. Hector, appreciate you. And Messiah in the back who's helping with record. Hope this episode inspires you to go and be your best self. And thank you for joining us on the journey. Hope you'll come back for the next episode. And look out for 2025. It's going to be our best year yet. It's the holiday season. No, we're all done. Thank you for tuning into the One Big Thing podcast. This has been fun. We are just closing out the studio today. You never could have imagined doing this when I launched this show, that I'd have an opportunity to have this conversation on Christmas Day with all of you guys, but to also have Hector in studio with me to ask me questions. I don't always get to do this. So as always, I think you heard in this episode today, my heart with the One Big Thing is that I am not unreachable. I am not untouchable. I hope that if you have guests or topics that are near and dear to your heart, no matter how personal they are, that I am one email away, one contact button away from bringing you guests that you guys want to hear from. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to follow and subscribe to the One Big Thing podcast. Don't forget that you can watch along with this today. This was all video recorded on YouTube at NQR Media. So you can watch all of these episodes. We put highlights and reels and shorts. But follow all of my social media channels so that you can get in contact with me. But if you did get a chance to listen to this episode today, do me a big favor. Tag me in it, share it on Instagram, share it on whatever social media platform you are so that I can follow you too as well. Let's make this a two-way street. You can listen to me, but I want to follow you in your journey so that I can bring you the stories and the people that you want to hear from. Until next time, thanks for being my guest on the One Big Thing podcast.